So I'll make a 3D printer. Now, I've tried quite a few times before to make one, but I've just failed. So today I'm going to try and make one. Now, it's been quite hard in the past just because how is it going to work? So my idea is that each layer will basically be a 5x5 design. This printer will probably print very small, 5x5x5, but for each layer there'll be a design. And each design there'll basically be pixels which are coloured and aren't coloured. For coloured pixels, it'll basically put a block down of our choice on, well, build plate. Whereas where it isn't a colour, then it'll basically place cardboard. This is so that it can print overhangs. So for the next layer, you can't print on nothing, so it'll just print on the cardboard instead. Now this should work. How are we actually meant to do this? It's going to be quite challenging, but that's going to be quite a lot of fun to figure out. Now, these 5 designs should make something that looks like this. Now, this design wasn't actually meant to be anything, and it doesn't look very good either, but I just want to try and show you the theory behind it. But the 3D print is going to be a bit, well, harder to make than just this design, and probably isn't going to be very effective since it can probably make, well, whatever it makes in around 30 seconds. Here's how something should look if it's got cardboard around it, and then we just get rid of it with a spike gun or with a machine. So let's start. So first I'm going to start with the build plate since this is pretty important. This is where the 3D prints will actually be happening, and as you can see it's quite small. Of course the prints are going to be quite small since I've never actually done this before, but I might make a big one in the future. Now this doesn't look too bad and I quite like how it looks, even though it's pretty simplistic. So then I started adding some pillars which will basically be what, well, like the rails that the vacuum pump will be on, which is what will place our blocks. Now, this might change a bit just because I want it to, or because, like, we need to add more to it or something. I don't know. Then I've placed in a chest, which will hold all the blocks, and then a vacuum pump, which is going to be turned on to shooting out, so it will place blocks. You can see where it's going to place the blocks, which is going to be pretty useful for when we're testing this thing out. Now I'm adding another, well, vacuum pump in a chest. Now this is for the cardboard. So this is going to have to be a bit of an angle, so it shoots block in the same place as the other chest. That's why I added the bearing. Now this might not be far enough away to actually get the right angle, so I might have to move it a bit further out. But anyway, finding the angle won't be too hard, but we might be limited by how far away it is again. Wrong way. And we're so close, but the problem is it can't turn anymore because the other vacuum pump and chest is blocking it from turning. So we're just going to have to change it a bit. And now they both shoot in the same block. You can only see one block outline, well, because they're both there. After we got that working, I basically just needed to make another build plate, since the sensor is going to need to detect, basically, what block it needs to place. Now this is going to be exactly the same, except this time nothing will be actually placed in it, I will just be painting it to, well, make a design. Now for now, it's only going to be a 2D printer, because that's the first step, and after that it's going to be a lot easier to add everything else. Now I'm making a big long arm, which will basically just hold the sensor. Now this sensor is basically going to detect, well, what colour it's seeing, since that's going to be pretty important. If there's no colour, it'll send the signal to place a cardboard block, and if there is a colour, it'll place the other block. At the moment it's currently caution block, but we can change it anytime, just by changing the block in the chest. I also put the sensor too far out when it's meant to actually detect the other side of this build plate, which is kind of a problem, but I'll just fix it later. Now I added a controller and an on switch to basically move the pistons around. Now this is going to help a lot since we need them to move, and also you can see how it's moving. So I'll basically do the first row, then the second row, then the third row, then the fourth row, then the fifth row. I put it in as 5 blocks instead of 4 blocks, because technically it's already starting on the first block, so it doesn't need to be 5, it needs to be 4. Now, currently the printer does not know when it needs to place a block. So what I'm basically going to do is this logic loop, which will basically just show when when it needs to place a block. Later this will hook up to another loop, so that it actually places a block, but currently I just need this logic gate to be on when it actually needs to place blocks. Now this is quite hard to do since all I'm going off is what I see, so this might take a while, but eventually I should get it right. Now it's quite far off at the moment since it doesn't actually last for long enough, the signal, which I can pretty easily change, and it goes on too early, which I can also pretty easily change. The logic loop is definitely way too fast, and I'm going to have to change it quite a bit. So now I think I've got it right. Now I've got to hook up another loop, which I said before, so it actually prints blocks. At the moment, I'm not going to focus on actually like printing the design, just printing blocks to make sure it's actually like going to place them in the right intervals. So now I'm going to hook up one of the vacuum pumps to this loop, which is also connected to the other loop. And as you can see, it does not work at all. It's placing blocks on top of each other, which is kind of a problem, especially for a 3D printer. So we're going to have to change some of our timings. It looks like the logic loop that's activating the vacuum pump is just going on a bit too quick. A bit too slow, I mean. So now we just need to change the timer a little bit, and it should work eventually. This is going to be quite a lengthy process since I need to manually do this over and over again, and it'd be even worse if the 3D printer was even bigger. But I almost got this right. It was so close, but it just started a bit too early, which means I just need to change one of the timers in the logic loop. And now it should work. It did pretty good on the first row, and now we'll see from the next rows. As long as it completes this layer without placing any blocks on top of each other or missing blocks out, it means that it should work, and we should be able to copy the design after a bit. This is pretty satisfying as well, especially for the first time to see it work for me, which is pretty cool. So now it's going to be a lot easier to turn this into actually a 2D printer, since now we actually have it like placing in the right position. Now all we need to do is hook up these two logic gates, which I did actually make before but forgot to tell you about. And now it should work. As you can see, we can print out whatever design we have, which is pretty cool. Now we could currently there's no way to take it off the build plate, which is kind of a problem, but we can kind of just delete the blocks underneath, and then we can just take it off. Now we can just get rid of the card. Now 3D printing is going to be a little bit harder than this, but this is pretty much the hardest bit done. I've got other bit. It's also pretty cool this out of, well, non-destructible blocks, which is pretty rare. So now I just need to rebuild the base plate. I'm actually going to add a cardboard layer on top, so that you can just delete it instead of deleting the actual base plate, which is going to be pretty helpful. Now we can just customize the design and print whatever we want, which is pretty cool. But of course it's not 3D, so we need to work on that. Now the first step is we need to be able to move down the base plate one block at a time. So after one layer, we can basically push it down one block and print the next layer on top. So this is pretty simple. I'm basically going to have a piston always applying pressure to push it down, also cardboard stopping it. So every time I want to move it down, I'll basically just have a spud gun shoot a piece of cardboard, which means it will move one block exactly. This is going to be pretty good, and it's also going to be pretty precise, which is going to be pretty useful. Now if we just connect up this button to this spud gun, now it should go back down. Goes down one block every time we do it. I also added this switch, which basically is connected to a NOR gate that is also attached to the piston. So in case we need to replace the cardboard, we can pretty easily. I also added a lighting system, which is pretty helpful, and it shows you when you can print and when you can't. The green light means that you can start printing, the orange light means it is printing, and the red light means you shouldn't start printing. This is a bit of a glitchy system since two lights can be on at once, which is quite a problem, but normally if a red light's on, it means something bad's going on. Now I'm going to add a sensor, which this will basically detect when we need to move the base plate down one block. And now it should move it down one block. Now it did work, but it also started placing other blocks. Now, realistically, we can start printing on the next layer, but there's still a few problems. I basically made it so it's all activated by a switch, which is activated by a spud gun, which means when we press the starting switch, it'll basically turn on the spud gun. But then it will also, when you turn down the base plate, it'll basically also stop it from printing for another 30 seconds until it's reset to its original position, then it can start printing again. Now at the moment it is kind of 2.5D, since it can't print actual different things all the way up. I mean, it can technically if you just make another design really quickly while it's printing. But anyway, now it should kind of work. We might be able to print another layer now. I don't know if this is going to work, since lots of things don't work for the first time and require quite a bit of troubleshooting. And as you can see, it did work. It went down to the next layer. I still don't know, it does take quite a while to reset, and I don't know if it will start placing blocks randomly, but as you can see, it'll start printing again. Now, this is pretty cool, since this is the hardest part done of the actual 3D printing process. Now we need to make it so that we can make more than one design, 5 to be exact. Now we could just keep this going on for quite a long time, and then just print 5 layers, but this thing does take a long time to print. It takes around 5 minutes to print the entire thing, since it takes lots of time to just reset the piston to its original place. After not too long it finished printing. Now the only problem is it doesn't stop automatically, so you've got to turn it off before it actually starts printing again. But anyway, now we need the 5 designs. So I made these 5 designs. So each will be 1 layer. So now I need to basically make it so it cycles to the next design after the base plate moves down. Now I've got an idea how to do it, and it should not be too hard to implement, and then we'll be able to 3D print. So for this, I'm going to use the same thing as the base plate. I'm basically going to have piston constantly applying pressure to the thing to move it down, and then some cardboard at the end, which will have 6 spud guns to shoot the cardboard, so it moves down by 6 every time, instead of 1. Now, this is also going to be connected to the NOR gate that the base plate piston is, so we can easily reset it if we want, and also replace the cardboard. Now currently it just moves along infinitely, because we hadn't added the cardboard or an actual, border for it to apply pressure to. So I'm going to add the border bits. And now if I press this, it should, work. Now currently there's nothing to actually destroy the cardboard, which is kind of a problem. And I do made to make this thing a bit shorter. But anyway, I'm just going to add the spud guns. And now if I press this button, it cycles to the next design, which is pretty helpful. Now I just need to make it so it cycles to the next design every time the base plate goes down, which is going to be pretty simple since there's just no logic gate for it. And now it should work, I think anyway. And as you can see, it does work. As you can see, it cycled to the next design, and it should start printing. Except it didn't. I kind of got a problem with the spud gun thing activating the switch, which should be easily solved. And now it should work, hopefully. Now it should reset all the way back to the first starting block and should start printing again. This is untested so far, so I'm gonna hope it works. I mean, I hoped it worked, but I'm pretty sure we encountered another problem, since it just wouldn't start printing again. Now, I've got an idea why this could be, but anyway. So this should be a pretty easy fix, and now we can actually start designing things. So I'm going to put a separate design on each layer, and this time I'm going to be designing a little house. So this house is going to be tiny, of course. It's going to be kind of like a toy house, I guess. Right, no. It's going to take around 5 minutes to print, which isn't great, but I'm just going to have to deal with it. So, yeah, this house isn't going to be great, since I can make it in around 30 seconds on my own, versus around 5 minutes in the actual 3D printer. But it's definitely more satisfying in the 3D printer, so it's kind of worth it. And as you can see, let's get back to the print. So it's pretty satisfying to watch this, especially when it's faster. And as you can see, it prints everything pretty flawlessly. And now we've got this little house. Of course, it's pretty slow to print and probably not worth it. I also made the light flash when it's done, so you know when it's done. I also made this room full of spud guns, which is basically just an easy way to get rid of cardboard, if you're lazy like me. Now, it's not exactly efficient, but it does work, so yeah. I also put it on a plane to see if we could 3D print on a plane, and I kind of hoped it'd work, and surprisingly, eventually it did. I also crashed into the world border, which was not great, but anyway. So yeah, this thing was meant to be a monster truck. Looks nothing like one. I don't know what's wrong with me, probably my art skills or something. But anyway. Now, it did work, and I was kind of expecting it to glitch out. But anyway, this thing was quite hard to make. It was quite challenging since I do not do loads of logic. But yeah, I did manage to get to it eventually. So anyway, I do have the blueprint, and it should be in the comments if you want it. And I hope you enjoyed. Anyway, I'm quite proud of this. Anyway, bye.